Welcome to today's Brain Life, where we'll challenge our brains to listen, inquire, figure things out, and explain to others what we've learned. I'm Mary Francis, your host for today's Brain Life. Maybe you're wondering if you really need a brain exercise DVD. After all, most seniors aren't trying to get A's and B's so they can get into a good college. But they do want to keep their brains in good shape so they can remember important things, like if they took that pill or not, or exactly what it was they came into the room to get. Sometimes it's hard for everyone to recall simple things like where we put our glasses. Everyone forgets names or birthdays. But you don't want to forget that doctor's appointment. That can be costly in more ways than one. If you've ever gone to the grocery store and come home with everything but the one thing you went there to get, or if you've lost your keys and found them in the most unusual place, then you'll be glad you found today's Brain Life.
Are you starting to forget? Are you feeling confused? Is that mind of yours singing the old brain blues? If you're feeling that way, don't just sit and complain. Do something about it. You need today's Brain Life. Come on and get you some today's Brain Life. You know you really need today's Brain Life. So let's get started with today's Brain Life.
Listen, inquire, figure out, explain. You're gonna breathe new life into that saggy old brain.
You need today's Brain Life. Come on and get you some today's Brain Life. You know you really need today's Brain Life. So let's get started with today's Brain Life. Well, we're gonna connect what you already know to some new information that'll make your brain grow. If you just try it out and play along, you're gonna keep those dendrites healthy and strong. You need today's Brain Life. Come on and get you some today's Brain Life. You know you really need today's Brain Life. Oh yeah. You know you need today's Brain Life.
I'm so glad you've joined us for this episode of today's Brain Life, the program especially designed to exercise the senior brain. After working with senior citizens for 25 years, I've discovered three very important things. First, because they've worked long and hard and lived through many challenging times, senior citizens want to enjoy life and have fun. Second, senior citizens are not quitters. They want to keep active and continue learning. Third, and most importantly, I've observed that although senior citizens are slowing down, they desperately want to maintain their independence. And being independent requires the ability to think, understand, and react. Fortunately, we can do something about keeping our brains as sharp as possible. Experts in brain research have shown that our neurological connections can always be enhanced, and we can exercise our brains in many different ways. New brain cells can be generated in human adults, no matter their age, and dendritic connections can be preserved if they are used. So, use it or lose it. Now, before we begin, I'd like to introduce you to Professor Hippocampus, noted researcher and neuronics instructor. Professor Hippocampus will explain to you the complex inner workings of your brain.
The brain. The brain is activated through interaction with the world. We perceive and respond through our five senses of seeing, hearing, smelling, tasting, and touching. Our brain stores information deep inside its gray matter. But those bits of information are of no benefit unless they can be connected with other bits of information that fit together and make sense. So making connections is vital to learning, understanding, and gaining wisdom. Now, it is estimated that we are born with 100 billion neurons, brain cells, whose job it is to communicate with each other in order to process information. The brain accommodates this fitting together of information through neuroelectric transmissions between brain cells along pathways called circuits. Brain cells have tube-like extensions called axons. Axons carry messages to other brain cells. Interestingly, they don't come into direct contact with one another, but send information into receptors called dendrites, which are parts of brain cells. Axons are close, but do not touch dendrites, being separated by a synaptic cleft. Neurons communicate with one another electrochemically. The neurons create chemicals that cause an electric signal, which sends information from the axon to the dendrites. Fascinating.
Thank you, Professor Hippocampus, for that excellent explanation of how the human brain works.
So let's get started with today's Brain Life.
Today's topic is wisdom. Now, in order to find out what wisdom means, we're going to take a look at Noah Webster's New Encyclopedic Dictionary and see how he defines this very important word. Okay, he says first, wisdom is accumulated learning or knowledge. Second, the ability to discern inner qualities and relationships or insight. And thirdly, good sense or judgment. That sounds like a senior citizen to me, don't you think? Brain research has shown that age brings wisdom. As we continue to gain knowledge, our brains perceive relationships more clearly, giving us insight. As our dendritic connections grow, we exercise better judgment and our wisdom increases. As Webster said, knowledge plus insight plus judgment equals wisdom. So the senior citizen is a fountain of wisdom. This lesson should be easy for you. Words of wisdom are often placed in a succinct phrase called a proverb, a maxim, or an adage. Ancient rulers like Solomon wrote volumes of such sayings intended to instruct their followers in making proper moral choices. Confucius wrote sayings regarding the characteristics of good moral leaders. Others, like the Greek storyteller Aesop or Benjamin Franklin, wrote well-turned phrases on etiquette, spiritual, or social behavior. Today's seniors are usually very familiar with proverbs because their parents use them to teach them lessons about life. One of my favorite thinking games to play with my seniors is to quiz them on these old adages, and then later to discuss exactly what they mean. In his story, A Christmas Carol, Charles Dickens wrote, and I quote, "But the wisdom of our ancestors is in the simile." Bits of wisdom are often communicated through a simile, a figure of speech drawing a direct comparison between two different things. Let's start off with some familiar similes in our memory quiz. The following similes are used to compare humans to various objects and animals. Here's how it works. I'll give you the beginning of a famous simile and you finish it for me. Now, since many of these will be very familiar to you, you can just speak out the answers as you remember them. Let's begin. Busy as a bee. Good. Eager as a beaver. Correct. Cool as a cucumber. Yes. Dead as a doornail. Hot as a poker. Stiff as a board. Yes. Light as a feather. Correct. Fit as a fiddle. Yes. Fat as a pig. Happy as a clam, right, or maybe a lark. Strong as an ox. Correct. Blind as a bat. Yes, I feel that way sometimes. Big as a house. As naked as a jaybird. I always wondered where that came from. Cold as ice. Yes. Sound as a dollar. Well, maybe not so sound anymore. Madder than a hatter. Good. Neat as a pin. Right. Heavy as lead. Right. Warm as toast. Good. Bold as brass. Right. Meek as a lamb. Correct. Poor as a church mouse. Yes. Nutty as a fruitcake. Right. Straight as an arrow. Correct. Wise as an owl. Well, excellent job. I told you you'd be good at this. That's a good place to finish the memory quiz. Let's move on to the Think and Link section. In this section, we will connect what we already know to some new information, just like those dendrites do in your brain. So let's think and link. See if you can finish the following sayings. God helps them who help themselves. Yes, God helps them who helps themselves. A penny saved is a penny earned. Correct. A penny saved is a penny earned. Early to bed, early to rise makes a man healthy, wealthy, and wise. Very good. Early to bed, early to rise makes a man healthy, wealthy, and wise. How about this? No pain, no gain. Right. No pain, no gain. Actually, it was originally written as, there are no gains without pains. Next one. Don't put off until tomorrow what you can do today. Correct. Originally, that was written as, never leave that tomorrow which you can do today. Next one. Little strokes. Yes, fell great oaks. Little strokes fell great oaks. And then, time heals all wounds. Correct. Originally, that was written as, time is an herb that cures all diseases. You're familiar with this one, penny wise, pound foolish. Correct. Penny wise, pound foolish. And the last one, men who live in glass houses, right, shouldn't throw stones. Originally, that one was written as, don't throw stones at your neighbors if your own windows are glass. These are all very familiar phrases, but do you know who wrote all of those sayings? It was one of our founding fathers. You're right, Benjamin Franklin. Ben Franklin wrote these famous sayings, and he published them in his famous book. Do you remember the name of that famous book? Yes, it was Poor Richard's Almanac. Poor Richard's Almanac. Now, you remember that Ben Franklin wrote the book, but who was Poor Richard? Now see, at the bottom of the page it says Richard Saunders. Well, Richard Saunders was the name, the pen name that Ben Franklin used for his almanac. Now you remember that Ben Franklin wrote Poor Richard's Almanac under the pen name of Richard Saunders. But note that next to the author's name, it says Philum. Do you know what Philum means? Philum is an abbreviation for a Greek term, philomath, meaning a lover of learning. The Greek root phil means to love, as in philanthropist, someone who loves mankind. Philosopher, a lover of wisdom. Philharmonic, those who love music. There's also philology, someone who loves literature, and philately, the love of collecting postage stamps. Remember, Benjamin Franklin wrote his famous book, Poor Richard's Almanac, under the pen name of Richard Saunders, Philam, an abbreviation for Philomoth, which means lover of learning. Moving on. Do you know how often an almanac is published? Yes, an almanac is published once a year. Poor Richard's Almanac was published yearly from 1733 to 1758. Now, for those of you who are good at mental math, how many years was that? 1733 to 1758. Let's see. 58 minus 33 equals 25. Right. Franklin, otherwise known as Richard Saunders Philam, lover of learning, published Poor Richard's Almanac each year for 25 years. Franklin's Almanac was a popular annual with over 10,000 copies in print each year. That's almost one for every 100 colonists. So 1 in every 100 colonists was purchasing Poor Richard's Almanac every year. Ben Franklin was doing a pretty swift business. Do you know the contents of an almanac? You might want to pause the DVD and see if you can guess everything that an almanac might contain. Here's your answer. Poor Richard's Almanac contained seasonal weather reports, astronomical signs seen in the heavens throughout the year, practical household hints, homeopathic remedies, puzzles, mathematical exercises, and other amusements, poems, and, of course, those helpful sayings. Over the course of 25 years, the popularity of Poor Richard's Almanac made Ben Franklin a wealthy and successful man. When Ben wrote the last of his almanacs, he put together all of the previous year's sayings on hard work, thrift, and success into a separate volume. He entitled this book, The Way to Wealth. This book was the first self-help book in the United States. Let's stop here and give ourselves the Think and Link quiz. I'm sure you'll do well since we just went over all this thinking and linking. Let's begin. In 1733, one of America's founding fathers began to publish a very popular book in which he included nuggets of wisdom like the following. He that falls in love with himself will have no rivals. Eat to live, not live to eat. He that lieth down with dogs shall rise up with fleas. The worst wheel of the cart makes the most noise. And my favorite, visitors and fish stink after 3 days. Question 1. Which founding father wrote these sayings? Right. Benjamin Franklin. Question 2. What did he call this famous book that contained these sayings? Right. Poor Richard's Almanac. Question 3. Under what name did he publish this book? Right. Richard Saunders. Question 4. The author's name, Richard Saunders, has the abbreviation film after it. What does that mean? Great. Philomoth. Question 5. And what does Philomoth mean? Right. Lover of learning. Question 6. The word Philomoth is from which language? Right. Greek. Just for fun, can you think of any other words that begin with the root philo or phila or phil? Philanthropist, someone who loves mankind. Philosopher, a lover of wisdom. Philharmonic, those who love music. Philology, someone who loves literature. Philately, the love of collecting postage stamps. Question 7. How often is an almanac published? Right, once a year. Question 8. Can you remember what kind of information is contained in an almanac? Right. Astronomical information, calendars, weather predictions, household hints and recipes, home remedies, puzzles, poems, and those famous sayings. Question 9. For how long did Ben Franklin publish his famous almanac? Right, from 1733 to 1758, for 25 years. Question 10. The Way to Wealth was one of the first books of its kind in America. What do we call those books that give advice on how to get ahead or improve ourselves? Right. Self-help books. Great job on the Think and Link quiz. Now it's time for the contemplation conversation. This is the part of today's Brain Life where we exercise our brains by explaining to others what we think about what we've just learned. Together, we will view several illustrations of Ben Franklin's famous sayings drawn by Oliver Pelton, a Boston engraver from the early 1800s. I will read each saying and then leave the illustration on the screen for a few seconds. During this time, you might want to pause the DVD and ask yourself some of the following questions. What is the wisdom in these sayings? Do you agree with the wisdom in these sayings? How have you used this wisdom in your life? Oh. Sloth, like rust, consumes faster than labor wears, while the used key is always bright. God helps them that help themselves. Lost time is never found again. Dost thou love life? Then do not squander time, for that is the stuff life is made of. The sleeping fox catches no poultry. There will be sleeping enough in the grave. Keep thy shop, and thy shop will keep thee. If you would have your business done, go. If not, send. Drive thy business, let not that drive thee. Sloth makes all things difficult. Industry, all easy. Early to bed and early to rise makes a man healthy, wealthy, and wise. Industry needs not wish, and he that lives upon hope will die fasting. There are no gains without pains. Then help hands, for I have no lands. He that hath a trade hath an estate. At the working man's house hunger looks in, but dares not enter. Industry pays debts, while despair increaseth them. Plow deep while sluggards sleep, and you shall have corn to sell and to keep. Work today, for you know not how much you may be hindered tomorrow. Handle your tools without mittens. Remember the cat in gloves catches no mice. Constant dropping wears away stones, and little strokes fell great oaks. By diligence and perseverance the mouse eat the cable in two. Diligence is the mother of good luck, and God gives all things to industry. Employ time well, if thou meanst to gain leisure. One today is worth 2 tomorrows. Since thou art not sure of a minute, throw not away an hour. Fly pleasure, and it will follow you. The diligent spinner has a large shift. Now I have a sheep and a cow, everybody bids me good morrow. I never saw an oft-removed tree, nor yet an oft-removed family that did so well as those that settled be. 3 removes are as bad as a fire, and a rolling stone gathers no moss. Excellent job on the contemplation conversation. Well, that's our show for today. We'll see you next time on Today's Brain Life. Now we've exercised our brains and we've challenged our minds, learned some new information of various kinds. But what's really important is that we maintain, 'cause it's use it or lose it for a healthy brain. We need today's brain life. We know we really Are you starting to forget? Are you feeling confused? Is that mind of yours singing the old brain blues? If you're feeling that way, don't just sit and complain. Do something about it.
You need today's brain life. Come on and get you some today's brain life. You know you really need today's brain life. So let's get started with today's brain life.
Listen, inquire, figure out, explain. You're gonna breathe new life into that saggy old brain.
You need today's brain life. Come on and get you some today's brain life. You know you really need today's brain life. So let's get started with today's brain life. Well, we're gonna connect what you already know to some new information that'll make your brain grow. If you just try it out,